The Young and the Restless spoilers full episodes Fridays December 5, 2025. There were moments in Genoa City when time felt suspended, as if the entire town held its breath, sensing that a reckoning was coming. And as the days drew closer to Victor Newman's long-awaited confrontation with Matt Clark, the tension became almost suffocating. For weeks, Sharon and Nick had existed in a state of fear so constant it had become part of their breathing rhythm. Every phone call, every unexpected knock at the door, every unanswered message from Noah left them frozen in dread, wondering if their son was still alive or whether Matt had finally crossed the line into irredeemable darkness. But now, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a shift, subtle but unmistakable. Victor Newman had taken control of the situation, and when Victor took control, the entire world changed shape around him. He arrived at Sharon's house with the silent gravity of a man who already knew the ending to a story everyone else was still trapped inside. Sharon opened the door with trembling hands, and Nick, standing behind her, looked drained, furious, and emotionally hollowed out. Victor didn't waste time comforting them, his presence was the comfort. He stepped into the room, removed his gloves with quiet precision, and delivered the words that felt like water after a year in the desert. He had a way to make Matt talk. Nick's body seemed to relearn how to breathe. Sharon grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. Relief didn't wash over them gently, it hit them so abruptly that it left them momentarily dizzy, as if hope itself was too sharp after so many days of despair. Nick revealed what he had learned hours earlier: the police were officially investigating Matt for fentanyl trafficking. The charge felt surreal, even by Genoa City standards. Sharon, still shaking, whispered the question that had haunted her since the beginning: why would Matt risk everything just to destroy their family? Why direct so much hate at people who never wanted anything from him? Victor's answer was cold, simple, and devastatingly accurate: the more money a man like Matt had, the more he feared losing it. Power didn't satisfy predators. It hollowed them out until they were desperately clawing for more, feeding on destruction because building anything real was too foreign for them. "I'll force his hand," Victor said with a calmness that chilled Nick and Sharon more than shouting ever could. But the real weapon wasn't Victor's voice. It was the AI software. The one stolen from Kane. The one improved by Phyllis. The one now sitting inside Victor's encrypted network like a dormant beast waiting to be unleashed. Victor explained that he intended to use the AI program to infiltrate, destabilize, and ultimately collapse every business and offshore account Matt possessed. He would take Matt's empire from the inside, suffocating the oxygen that gave him power. And once Matt realized everything he had built was crumbling, he'd break. He'd talk. He'd reveal where Noah was. Victor didn't care whether Matt spilled the truth willingly or out of desperation. He only cared that Noah came home alive. Sharon and Nick sat at the table in stunned silence as Victor opened his laptop, fingers moving with the efficiency of a man who had rebuilt empires from scratch. The glow from the screen illuminated his face, sharpening the lines etched there by decades of war and survival. He activated the AI, and the system responded instantly with a low mechanical hum as though recognizing its master. In that moment, Victor wasn't simply a businessman, he was the architect of a digital war. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, a very different kind of war was unfolding. Detective Annie Stewart had been working with Detective Burrow for years, and they had once made an efficient team, until Annie became consumed by ambition, resentment, and the quiet hunger to be recognized as Genoa City's next unstoppable force. She knew that the Newman case could be her breakthrough moment. So when Burrow hesitated, insisting on protocol and chain of command, Annie made her choice. She betrayed him. She shared confidential information with the wrong people, played both sides of the investigation, and ensured that when the dust settled, she would stand in the spotlight alone while Burrow took the fall. Her betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, subtle, the kind of betrayal born from ego rather than malice. And it would soon cost everyone far more than she anticipated. But the real danger wasn't in the police station. It was in the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Matt had cornered Noah and Sienna in a dim concrete room that smelled of rust, dust, and stale fear. Noah's hands were trembling from dehydration. Sienna's eyes had turned hollow, her spirit frayed from days of captivity. Matt stood in front of them, blocking their only exit with a smile that twisted into something crueler than simple anger. He tapped the doorframe lightly, as though mocking their futile attempts at escape. "Going somewhere?" he asked, voice dripping with condescension. Noah stepped forward, mustering the last fragments of courage left in him, physical weakness and moral fury clashing in his chest. He shoved Matt, but the effort was clumsy, fueled by desperation rather than force. Sienna grabbed Noah's arm to pull him back, terrified that Matt, already unpredictable, might lash out violently in response. But Matt didn't flinch. He didn't stumble. He simply laughed, as if their attempt to escape amused him rather than threatened him. "You must think you're lucky," he sneered, staring at Noah with venomous interest. "No more sneaking around, His tone held something deeper than cruelty, a twisted sense of betrayal. It was as if Noah's defiance offended him personally. That was when Sienna snapped. "Mitch, you're sick," she screamed, voice cracking from exhaustion and rage. "You left us here with no food. No water. You abandoned us." Her words sliced through the room, raw and trembling. She wasn't speaking to a captor for the first time, she was speaking to the man she once trusted, the man she once married, the man who had slowly transformed into a stranger shaped by greed, ego, and something far darker than simple resentment. Matt's expression hardened instantly. The name Mitch, one he despised, landed like a slap. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened, and his breath accelerated with something between fury and fractured pride. He stepped closer, too close, invading their space with a presence meant to intimidate. "You think I left you," he hissed, voice low, pupils narrowing into something feral. "You think I didn't know exactly what I was doing?" That was the moment Noah realized Matt was not simply cruel. He was spiraling, losing himself to paranoia and a distorted sense of ownership over the people whose lives he had trapped in this twisted web. And Victor Newman, miles away, couldn't see any of it. Not yet. Back in Sharon's kitchen, the AI program accelerated, lines of code cascading across Victor's screen like a digital rainstorm. Within minutes, the software had infiltrated Matt's shell companies, cloned his financial pathways, and begun rerouting small but strategically devastating bits of data toward encrypted Newman servers. Victor watched with clinical detachment as the empire Matt built started to falter, accounts freezing, access being denied, assets vanishing. "He's going to feel this," Victor murmured, not as a threat but as a promise. And behind those quiet words was the unspoken truth. Victor wasn't trying to win. He was trying to end Matt. Nick leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. Sharon held her breath. And just as the final breach initiated, just as Victor was about to trigger irreversible collapse, Burrow burst into the building where Matt was hiding. He didn't wait for backup. He didn't wait for a warrant. He aimed his gun directly at Matt's chest and shouted an order that, mercifully, cut through the building's tension like a blade. Matt froze. For one brief moment, chaos paused long enough for hope to breathe. Burrow handcuffed Matt, voice steady despite the adrenaline crashing through him. And in that instant, Noah and Sienna felt the first real flicker of survival in days. But even in defeat, Matt smiled. Because monsters rarely fear cages. They only fear truth. And somewhere inside him, Matt still held secrets capable of tearing the entire Newman family apart, secrets Victor was only beginning to uncover. The air inside the abandoned room thickened like poison as tension spiraled out of control. Noah could feel every heartbeat pounding violently against his ribs, each second threatening to shatter into chaos. Sienna, trembling but fueled by a burst of rage and betrayal, lunged toward Matt with a desperate intention to slap him, not simply out of anger but out of disbelief at what he had become. For a brief instant, time hung suspended. Her hands slicing through the stale air, her breath sharp, her eyes burning with a mixture of pain, regret, and a fury that had been boiling for far too long. But Matt caught her wrist midair. The force of his grip tightened, and within moments his other hand rose to her throat. The shock of it knocked the air from her lungs. She gasped, her body arching back as his fingers pressed into her skin, not hard enough to kill but hard enough to silence. Noah shouted, but the sound felt distant, swallowed by the terror gnawing at him. Matt's eyes were wild, not with love or remorse, but with a feverish desperation that came from losing control of everything he once believed he controlled. Then, as quickly as he grabbed her, Matt let Sienna go. She stumbled backward, choking, clutching her neck, tears spilling uncontrollably. Not from fear alone but from the sickening realization that the man she once trusted had become a stranger forged from delusion and resentment. Noah stepped forward, no longer able to mask the fury burning through him. Accusation poured from him, accusation born from exhaustion, helplessness, and the dawning clarity that Matt had been targeting him from the start. He knew now that all the cruelty, all the manipulation, all the orchestrated chaos had been orchestrated with one purpose. To continue a warped, senseless vendetta against Sharon and Nick, a feud so deranged it had swallowed logic and sanity whole. Noah could hardly process how deeply Matt's obsession with his parents had burrowed into the man's mind. And as he demanded to know when any of this would end, the words cracked inside him like breaking bones. Matt didn't flinch. Instead, something cold, triumphant, and monstrous curved across his face, an expression that revealed how far gone he truly was. The declaration rolled from him like poison, a reminder that his rage was not winding down but escalating. He hadn't reached the end of his revenge. He was only beginning. Noah felt his knees weaken, not from fear but from the crushing hopelessness of realizing the nightmare was far from over. And Sienna, still shaking, still fighting for breath, whispered an apology that spilled out in fractured gasps. She apologized for lying to him, for hiding the truth, for pretending she and Noah had secret intentions when, in reality, everything had spiraled out of her control long before she realized the danger. Her voice trembled not just with fear but with guilt that she had played any part, however small, in the storm now consuming all of them. But Matt rejected her apology instantly. His rage cracked open into something loud and violent, erupting with such force that Sienna took a step back as if struck by the weight of his fury. Matt couldn't bear the sight of her regret because it mirrored everything he couldn't accept about himself. He accused her of wanting Noah, of watching him, of betraying him not just physically but emotionally, of fueling jealousy he could no longer contain. His voice rose with the rawness of a man unraveling at the seams, projecting every insecurity, every wound, every dark suspicion he had buried. To him, Sienna's fear wasn't the symptom of his cruelty, it was proof of her guilt. Amid the escalating madness, Noah turned to Burrow with desperate rationality, promising silence in exchange for freedom. He begged for a chance to escape, trying to reason with the officer who had stepped into the chaos with authority but who now stood suspended between duty and corruption. But Burrow didn't budge. His voice remained steady and cold, declaring that none of them were going anywhere. Whether out of rigid adherence to protocol or a deeper agenda yet to be revealed, he anchored himself firmly in the storm. That was when Matt escalated the situation from psychological warfare to something far more lethal. With a chilling calmness, he revealed a small bag of fentanyl, his fingers brushing it with the eerie tenderness of a man holding something sacred. The sight of it made Noah's stomach twist. Matt suggested Noah should take something to take the edge off, as if offering a twisted form of compassion. Noah refused instantly. Every moral instinct in him rejected the poison in Matt's hand. But Matt wasn't offering. Matt was commanding. Each refusal from Noah sharpened Matt's fury, twisting it into something darker. His voice grew more venomous as he announced that Noah would ingest the drug, or else Sienna would die. Noah's breath caught. It wasn't an idle threat. It wasn't a bluff. It was a countdown. Matt held the power in that moment, and he wielded it with a cruelty that made the room feel smaller, suffocating. Noah tried to break through the madness, asking whether Matt would actually shoot his own wife. The question hung in the air with a fragile and horrifying weight. But Matt didn't answer with remorse. He answered with manipulation. He declared he wouldn't pull the trigger. Burrow would. And then, with devastating clarity, Burrow complied. He raised his gun, aiming straight at Sienna. The betrayal sent a wave of shock tearing through Noah, through Sienna, through the very air. Sienna, trembling, begged Noah not to give Matt what he wanted. She would rather face the risk of death than let Matt drag Noah down into the same pit he had fallen into. Matt's voice dropped into a chilling certainty. It was time for consequences, he said. Time for Noah to learn that defying him carried a penalty. The order was clear: pick up the bag. Noah's mind spun, torn between saving Sienna and refusing to surrender his life to Matt's twisted need for dominance. The hesitation stretched into the thick air, seconds feeling like hours, until Noah finally reached for the bag, his hand shaking violently as dread seeped into his veins. But just as Matt savored the moment of triumph, Burrow shifted. Something flickered in him, a spark of conscience, justice, or simply the realization that Matt had crossed a line too deep for even a corrupt man to follow. With a swift motion, Burrow redirected his gun, no longer aiming at Sienna but straight at Matt. His voice boomed through the room with unshakable authority, announcing that Matt Clark was under arrest for possession of narcotics with intent to distribute. The shock struck Matt with physical force. His fury shattered into something frantic and unstable. Before he could retaliate, Burrow's backup burst into the room, flooding the space with officers who had no idea they had walked into a hive of betrayal, manipulation, and moral collapse. Burrow, his face hardened with the resolve of a man reclaiming his identity, declared to Annie Stewart over the radio that they had apprehended the suspect. Annie's voice crackled through the speaker, edging with disbelief and excitement, unaware of the treachery simmering at the edges of the case. And as the officers subdued Matt, Noah and Sienna collapsed into each other, relief mixing with exhaustion, trauma, and the echo of fear still vibrating inside their bones. The nightmare wasn't over? Not by a long shot. Matt's arrest didn't erase the damage. It didn't silence the secrets. It didn't cleanse the corruption tangled within Burrow or Annie. But it was a moment of survival. A moment of reclaiming breath after drowning for too long. A moment that would reshape everything that came next. Because even in handcuffs, even surrounded by officers, even stripped of his power, Matt's eyes still burned with one final message. This wasn't over. Not for Noah. Not for Sienna. Not for the Newmans. And the worst of his secrets had not yet been revealed.